final document that comes out of this discussion that we are just beginning. It is now my honor and privilege to invite our first panelist, who is going to give us what we call the think piece. This came out of, a brainstorming session of people interested in the sector. And this is Mr. Joshua Ogwal. He's a partner at Lodimark Advocates with specific experience in structuring of investment and financial arrangements. Before joining Chambers, he worked for 8 years in the financial institutions, where he participated in the structuring of strategic interventions of both a public and private nature in the agricultural sector. Joshua has also participated as an entrepreneur in commodity trading in the districts of Masindi, Chiriadongo, Apache, and Lira, focusing mainly on food crops like maize, beans, and sorghum. He is an alumnus of the Institute for National Transformation. And so I decided to wear the badge so that I am also identified with the same institution. Mr. Ogwal, you are welcome to start us off with the first presentation of the day.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Really appreciate that introduction. I am just hoping that the partners in my firm are not going to be upset when they hear of my side hustle as well, but thank you for that. I will really be presenting this on behalf of CASTLE, and we'll be presenting the recommendations that came out of some really in-depth discussions we had on the agricultural value chain and what can be done in light of the glaring challenges that have been exposed, particularly during this COVID period. And I'll try to be brief and would be happy to answer questions after this presentation. I'll begin with a background which would really give us an indication of what the challenges are. We've talked quite a bit in the past about issues surrounding the limited budgetary allocation into the agricultural sector. We've talked about things around the conflicting policies of government in this sector. Now, this is talk that goes on and on and on. But let's focus on what the impact of this actually is. When government invests less through budgetary allocations in the agricultural sector, what it means is that the structural challenges that exist in the sector are not going to be addressed, because these structural challenges in any sector usually have to be addressed first and foremost by the government. So for as long as those interventions continue to be limited or untargeted, then the structural challenges continue to subsist. Over the past 5 to 10 years, we've seen a lot of interventions by government. We've had NARO, which has continued to play a role in research on production activities, particularly seed production, crop yield. We've had NADS, which has been doing quite a bit in terms of technical assistance and extension, but we've also had the districts which have been doing their own technical assistance and extension services to farmers for production purposes. We've now had UWEC, Operation Wealth Creation, which has been doing its own interventions and to a certain extent taking over some of the interventions by NADS. There's so much that is happening, and usually when there's so much that is happening, there is very little impact that is being caused because of the lack of coherence in some of these interventions. So that creates a lot of confusion on what government's role is going to be, and also how the greatest impact can actually be achieved through these interventions. There's also certainly the challenge of climate change, which is facing every country. But what this means for us is that we need to work quickly to transform our agricultural sector to make it high impact, high value, and to give a real benefit to the farmers and to the wider economy. Finally, we've got a couple of challenges that have together coalesced to cause significant waste of resources in the sector. And those are diseases, both crop and livestock diseases, which is largely as a result of poor farming practices or poor seed or poor quality of some of the livestock. We've got issues of poor storage, which again has caused significant wastage, season in, season out, and every wastage can be calculated in monetary terms. So it's real wastage for the economy. And finally, the fact that we still use, a lot of our farmers still use those old farming methods that have challenges in terms of productivity and yield. What are the assumptions that we have had in mind as we have thought through these recommendations that I'll be presenting to you shortly? We know that COVID has exposed a lot of gaps in the agricultural sector. What I've talked about are all gaps, and to the extent that it becomes more and more difficult during a lockdown period for farmers to pass their goods into the cities, for customers in the cities to access agricultural commodities. These are things that show that if these gaps are not addressed, they will only foment and worsen. Now, our assumptions are that even after the lockdown period, we're likely to still continue to have certain restrictions in the movement of goods and persons. Now, restrictions of this nature are inevitably going to affect also the movement of commodities. So that's something that needs to be taken into account. We don't know how long these restrictions will continue, maybe 21 days, maybe more. We also are working upon the assumption that over the next couple of weeks, maybe months, markets will continue to operate using standard operating procedures issued by the government. Now, what this directly means is that there may be restrictions on the numbers of farmers and the quantities of goods that can be channeled through these markets. And finally, we really don't know what the future holds in terms of the pandemic. We have seen the first wave, which has affected our country. We don't know whether there will be subsequent waves, and the subsequent waves will only come with greater challenges. So those are the things that we have assumed and which should be borne in mind when as you take down these recommendations. Going into the recommendations that come out of our think tank, the first, like in any other intervention, should begin with production, recommendations on the production side in agriculture. I've already said that a lot of the farming practices are old, and we have the challenge that when these old farming technologies, if I may use the word, are used, the yields are low, and that obviously impacts on the ability for farmers to gain a good return. The first thing that one thinks about is the need for training and technical assistance, which is indeed required. But we've got the challenge that agriculture in Uganda is dominated to up to 80% by the smallholder farmer. And this is something that is historical and is unlikely to change in the foreseeable future. So if interventions on the production side are to occur and occur effectively, then there'll be need to also do a lot more mobilization of these smallholder farmers so that they may think differently. They'll not think in a singular manner as smallholder farmers, but will think more as farmer groups and will form farmer groups. And if possible, and where it can be done, to re-establish these cooperatives that used to exist through the farmer groups. Why is this essential for effective production? The coordination that comes through farmer groups and cooperatives makes it much easier to disseminate training, technical assistance, financial services, monitoring of crop production, all of these things can be done with greater ease and therefore at lesser cost if you have mobilized units in place on the production side. The next area for intervention where we're making recommendations are on the side of market access. But these, as you will see, are really still linked also to the manner in which you organize the production side. We know that, and it has been said time and time again, that up to 80% of the population is involved in agriculture. The truth is, we don't know who these people are. We don't know what it is exactly they're doing. If they're if they're involved in crop agriculture, which kind of crops are they growing, and where are these crops being grown? There is a need for actual registration of the farmers across the country. If it is those who are involved in arable farming, those who are involved in livestock production, all of that needs to be registered and tracked. By doing this, we're able to know the actual quantity and quality of product that is on the field, in the farms, and on its way through the markets. Once that is known, once that information is available, then it makes it much easier to close the gap between supply and demand. And over and above that, government is able to plan a lot better. Government and organized farmer groups are able to plan a lot better because they'll be able to better project surpluses and deficits based on what they see as the registered produce on the ground. Linked to that and growing from that is the need to then leverage ICT. I mean, we've all been in a very unique situation during this lockdown period where we've had to do quite a bit through the internet. And it's shown us the possibilities that the internet actually does have to link people together. That can be applied in agriculture, to use ICT to actually link the farmers, particularly once you've registered the farmers and the crop and basically the product. You can then use that as a platform to link the farmer to the market side. And that will also help to address issues of access to the markets within the towns and the cost that comes with that access. Now, the possibilities of creating platforms of this nature are huge. And these are platforms that can be created both at a private level and at a public level under the auspices of the Ministry of Agriculture. The final issue which we recommend, again, around market access is storage. But this is, again, directly linked to the manner in which we organize the production systems through cooperatives and farmer groups. Once these systems are organized, then you're able to better ensure that that stock that comes out of the farms can be centrally stored, thus reducing the cost of storage. The next area for recommendations is on financing. One thing that has become very clear is that banks are very hesitant to lend into the agricultural sector. And analyses that have been done indicate that only a very small proportion of private credit goes into the financial sector, particularly on the production side. But there are really two reasons that's the case. The first is banks generally do not understand the risk that exists in agriculture, particularly on the production side. So they are more willing to fund the higher levels of the linkage. So probably factories that are doing processing or the like, but never on the production side, or very rarely on the production side. Also, we've got the reality that most of our banks are really foreign-owned commercial banks. So their focus is not really going to be on development areas, but rather on where they can make the highest profit. What does this mean? This means that we've got to deliberately think of new financing structures or beef up existing financing structures for agriculture. The first thing that one can target in this regard is the circles. Over the past 10 years, circles have been popularized, and during this period, they've actually had a significant impact on rural development. Now, if these can be further formalized and improved in terms of governance and capability, then the ability of farmers to pool their resources to fund their activities, particularly on the production side, is significantly enhanced. As of today, many rural circles operate straight out of tin boxes. That cannot happen if you're actually to ensure that they have a significant impact that they should have in the agricultural sector. The second issue, again, which builds from the lack of knowledge of the risk in agriculture, is the need to have specialized agricultural financial institutions. We've got some really good ones like Abi Finance, Abi Trust, which have come up, and they're doing a good job, but there's still so much to do. The reason that these institutions need to be specialized is that in agriculture, it is not just credit that is required, it's credit and technical expertise. So there is need for institutions that can merge these two, the ability to coordinate the channeling of quality technical assistance to the farmer, but also to back that with actual finance. That's when you have real value creation in the agricultural value chain. The final recommendation is the need to encourage the use of agro insurance. Over the past couple of seasons, again, we've had a lot of stories regarding the losses that are being experienced across the value chain because of poor harvests, which result from changing climatic conditions. Now, the person who loses the most, obviously, on this is the farmer. Banks and other institutions have come up with various products for agricultural insurance. The problem with a lot of these products is that they are expensive on the one hand and restrictive on the other. However, this can be changed if there is a deliberate policy to encourage the purchase of agricultural insurance across the country, because a mass subscription into insurance will inevitably reduce the cost of insurance, because you have a lot more premium payments coming to the insurers. So that's something that needs to be encouraged, but at a policy level. One thing that needs to also be discussed when discussing recommendations of what can be done in agriculture is the women empowerment issue, which isn't always discussed in linkage rather with agriculture. I will maybe just give you an example of something that I experienced when I was working directly within the financial sector. I was working for a bank a couple of years ago, which set up a mortgage product and really popularized mortgages. And what we discovered was that when a particular customer was beginning to default, and usually that customer was a man, the easiest way of getting that customer to get back to his payments was to find out who his wife was, call on his wife, and let the wife become aware of the default. As soon as the wife was aware of the default stopped. That shows you the impact of women in creating stability, not just in a home, but in an economy. Now, take this to the agricultural sector. In agriculture, women are actually, particularly in the rural areas, women are actually the primary source of labor in agriculture. And yet, because of the power relations in the rural environment, they are unable to reap from that. And that in itself also encourages a cycle of poverty. If mobilization of farmers through cooperatives and farmer groups can be done in a manner that creates emphasis on women empowerment and on training of women in farming methods, but also importantly in financial literacy, this will be a major factor in eradicating poverty in the rural areas. So this is one recommendation that comes with benefits beyond just the agricultural sector. The other area that would need to be talked about is on the policies. We've already said that government has several initiatives in play which are uncoordinated. There is need for more effort towards coordinating these initiatives and having these initiatives work very closely with organized farmer groups. Now, this has the direct benefit that it will affect positively the manner in which research is done and the manner in which government intervention is provided. Once there is that organization among the farmers through their farmer groups and the link between the government institutions directly with the farmer groups to get information and work on the basis of that information in coming up with their initiatives. One unique issue that has grown right out of the COVID pandemic we've had is the emphasis that has arisen on the need for healthy feeding and the need to eat whole organic food. This provides a huge opportunity for Uganda, an opportunity for Uganda to position itself really not just as a food basket, but as a food basket for organic foods. The emphasis that has gone into organic foods has obviously significantly sent up the premium for organic food. And the blessing that we have as a country in terms of our soils and our climatic condition puts us in pole position to take advantage of this. However, we cannot take advantage of this unless we take a really stern position with respect to resisting the legalization of GMOs. Where GMOs have been introduced, they've been introduced against the backdrop of the need to ensure food security in the countries that they've been introduced. Uganda is in a unique situation where, in order for us to achieve food security, we simply need to deal with more of the structural issues in our agricultural sector, on the production side, on the storage side, basically providing value in our agricultural sector rather than popularizing the use of GMOs. So that's something that needs to be considered. The other issue is around, again, this is a unique situation that has arisen that can be taken advantage of. The fact that we've had rising water levels in the lakes and along the River Nile. Previously, Uganda has not been able to do significant scales of irrigation schemes because of the limitations that are created by the Nile water treaties. The fact that now there is a challenge on the rising water levels does give an opportunity for government to actually look into irrigation as a way of ensuring that there is stable production in the agricultural sector. And this is something that can be done. We don't know how long these rising water volumes will last, but for as long as they last, an opportunity exists, and that opportunity can be seized. Finally, there is need for greater emphasis on technology and innovation. And this cannot be talked about separately from the education system. If we are to have better homegrown technologies for our agricultural sector, then we need to emphasize teaching agriculture. We need to emphasize education in agriculture, right from secondary school to tertiary to university. The more you have people looking into agriculture and researching it, then the greater the chances you'll have technologies that are fit for purpose in Uganda and innovations that actually work for us. Finally, I'll just talk about the recommendations that we're making on the milk, in the milk industry specifically. Over the past around about 5 years, the milk industry has faced significant challenges, and these challenges have grown largely as a result of two things. The first is the low local demand for milk. We apparently produce a lot of milk and don't consume much. Secondly, there are lots of regional non-tariff barriers that affect the ability of our milk producers and processors to be able to access markets beyond Uganda. And these are challenges that need to be looked at. The recommendations that we're making is, first and foremost, need to research in greater depth on the products that we are coming up with within our milk sector, so that we can have more, first of all, better quality products and a wider range of products in order to increase demand for milk, for milk sector products. The second issue would come directly from the ability of government to popularize the consumption of milk. And how does the government come in here? Through the requirement for nutrition in schools. If schools are to ensure that the children within these schools are properly catered for, milk is something that can be provided for them. And this will immediately increase the demand for milk and therefore give greater value to milk producers. Finally, there is the need for the government to deliberately negotiate the removal of the non-tariff barriers, particularly within the EAC. A lot of talk has been made about the manner in which the EAC is bringing the regional countries together. But you can't have togetherness if you still have imbalance in the manner in which market access is given to particular countries. And in our case, we have gotten the shorter end of the stick. There is need for deliberate effort in negotiating some of these treaties to remove the barriers. Finally, I will leave you with a word that although we face challenges today during the COVID and post-COVID period, the challenges do come with opportunities, and the challenges have exposed gaps, which if we can close, and if we can cease to close, then we'll be able to drive the agricultural sector forward in a robust way and be able to actually transform it. With that, I thank you, and I'll be happy to receive any critique and answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ogwal. You may not receive questions right now, but the critique is going to come, and I'm going to invite our first discussant. But before I do so, I'd like to say thank you to everyone that's using the Q&A section. There are actually a couple of questions there. Joshua, you can visit that tab. There are questions for you. And Helen Roger has introduced us to something called, or would like to introduce something called Agri Katale. I'm guessing this is some kind of marketplace for people who are producing, who have agricultural produce. Hopefully, you'll be able to share that with us. Now, many of the questions I have read, and some of what Joshua focused on, touched on the smallholder farmer. So I'm going to move to a discussant who is also described as a smallholder farmer. This is Dr. Immaculate Naluyima. Dr. Naluyima is a smallholder farmer and a private veterinarian focusing on clinical medicine and herd health. She has previously worked for the National Animal Genetic Resource Center and Data Bank as an officer in Entebbe in charge of a livestock environmental station. She has also worked for the President of the Republic of Uganda, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, on his personal dairy farm to improve the genetics of his herd through artificial insemination. She has served as the chairperson of Red Cross Mbarara, National Multi-Stakeholders Pig Value Chain Platform, and vice chairperson, Green and Fresh Farmers Cooperative. She is a 2015 Aspen New Voices Fellow, and she has a Bachelor of Science in Veterinary Medicine and a Master's of Health Services Research from Makerere University. Dr. Immaculate, you are welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And I would like to thank Joshua Ogwal for a very good presentation he made. And taking on from him, I would like to discuss a few things. One, he talked about it's very important actually to make sure that agriculture is taught right from secondary, tertiary, right from secondary and tertiary. But actually, as I, for one, have actually noticed that it's actually much more important to start it from primary level. We actually have a school called MST Junior School, and this school is just that teaches everything, math, science, and all the other things. It's a normal school, but with a bias to agriculture. And what the different thing we do with the rest of, from the rest of the school is that the rest of the schools is that we get the theory out of the books. We get the theory out of the books and then make it practical. An example, like in if the class P4 class is dealing with rabbits, we shall give them rabbits to look after, and then they learn the antics of rabbit rearing. If the P3 class is teaching, learning about chicken, that's the same thing. They'll go to the farm and really get the hands-on training for chicken. We go on like that, and then if the P3 class, and in our school, right from P3 up to P7, they have banana plantations where that is a long-term project where they look after this project, and they get to know all the good things. They get to know all the technologies and best practices about it. So if a child comes from this school and then goes to secondary, they already have this love for agriculture, and then they'll continue to the tertiary institute, and they will continue up to the university. Now, we are not saying that they are going to all become farmers, but they will have something, they will know and learn how to farm. And even if they go to any other organization, or even if they become ministers, they have this thing and passion, and they can still do so many things. If they become engineers, they're going to know how to make sure that they they make things that are actually tailored to our agriculture. And then the other thing is, in this COVID time, it's unfortunate that we've been locked down, but it was very good. I for one embraced it, because first of all, God can't punish you twice. Much as we are locked down, there's plenty of rain. So we farmers use the rain to farm. And while the rest of the people are like in other countries where they have drought, they're having issues with land, God gave us a lot of rain, and we've been using that rain to cultivate and plow. Except for the other places like in Fort Portal and Bundibujo, where, the rains were too much and they caused a lot of problems, in Kasese. So, but the rest of the places, the rains have not been so much. They've been good enough, and we've really planted, and farmers now just need to go and in the next few months, they'll be harvesting. So that was a very good thing. Now, while we were in the lockdown, like Ogwal said, there was so much, many people now are starting to deal with, first of all, the borders. There's not so much for us to move from one place to another, because we can't move. There's restrictions here and there. But the beauty with this, when we can go on to the e-commerce or agriculture commerce, first of all, we do the e-learning, where we still train the kids to do so many things on YouTube and online. And then also there's the agriculture or the e-commerce, whereby there are many groups, like Ogwal said. There are very many groups. There's Famunela, the Helena said, there's Agricatale. There's another very good program that happened in Kenya way back. It's called MFARM, where farmers actually, you don't have to leave your home. You just stay in your garden, but you subscribe to this, like Agricatale, you subscribe to it. First of all, when you are in there, when you subscribe to it, you're going to have access to market. You're going to have all these other farmers you're going to join with. And then you're also going to have different people going to buy your products. They could be processors, they could be restaurants, different people, or they could even be simple homes where you're going to deliver. And then as long as you put your product up there, and then people will contact you, and you find a way, so you don't have actually to leave your home. I'll give you an example. Right now, while we're in this, I always slaughter pork about 100 kilos every week or so. And then in this lockdown, of course, the consumption was low, but I continued supplying my clients, and we kept using WhatsApp and Facebook, and they called me. And then they ask me, okay, will you slaughter this weekend? I'm like, yes, I will slaughter. And then I know who is going to take so much. Even right now while I'm talking, I have people, before I came, I had to leave a delivery for them. So they've come to pick them. They've come to pick it. So we need to embrace the e-commerce or basically using online markets. And I, for one, if we go for the agricultural, like Helen is going to tell us, I've seen someone saying the agricultural, they will give us more insight on that. And this is going to bridge the gap between the supply chain, because we have issues, very many issues with farmers out there. Go and you dig, you plow. What hurts me is this, that after you've plowed, after you spent so many, like I, for one, wake up at 4 a.m. to look after my pigs. And then I raised my pigs for 6 months, and then someone just walks into my farm. When they walk in, I sell them the pig, and then maybe later when they go to sell, they get an extra 4,000 shillings, because right now a kilo of pork is 14,000 shillings, but they'll buy it off me maybe on farm gate at 10,000 or 8,000. So the only thing this person has done is to walk into my farm, and then he takes this extra 4,000 shillings. Yet, if I am connected to the right market on online, my client like you will just say, I need so many kilos of pork, and I find a way to deliver them to you. So I'll get actually more money. And then because it's the middlemen are there, they help the farmers, but they kind of really rip off the farmers. So it's very good if we embrace the online marketing or the online agriculture services. And then the other is, how are we going to increase productivity? We are going to increase productivity, first of all, by training, like I said earlier, right from maybe primary, secondary, and all that. But then there are other gaps even now, because the agriculture thing of training is just coming up again. Like you see, I think this year, beginning of this year, there was a controversy of agriculture, of the curriculum for agriculture.
The reviewed curriculum, yes.
Yeah, the reviewed curriculum for agriculture. But there are other farmers right now like me, or other farmers who are already practicing. They're already farming, but they need this. They need a lot of information. There's a big knowledge gap. Like when we go online or when we teach, I do a lot of trainings to farmers, but you find there's a big knowledge gap, and we need to bridge that. And how are we going to do that? By giving so many trainings, a lot of trainings. Of course, these trainings will come depending on what the farmers need. And then a lot of, after the training, there's extension services, like the NADS, yes, the Operation Wealth Creation. All these things are very important to the farmers. And if we do that, we are going to actually increase productivity. You're going to increase productivity by bridging the knowledge gap, so that the farmer knows, I need to plant this at this time, I need to put manure at this time, I need to put this, maybe this pesticide at this time. If they learn that, then already productivity has increased without actually doing much in terms of using a big piece of land. Like I, for one, I'm a smallholder farmer. I use only 1 acre on my farm, but I do so much on this 1 acre. And I'm well endowed. Thank God that I, for one, maybe I'm a little bit different from other farmers, because maybe I went to school, I'm a vet, so I'm already applying the knowledge and I have even access to internet, so that I can either check it on Google or anywhere, and I have access to other people as well. But these farmers in the villages, the 80% or the rest of the farmers out there, don't have that knowledge. So that's why we need to train them. That's why we need to train them and make sure they have. And then the other thing is access to finance. Like I concur with him, access to finance is a very big challenge. I'll give you an example with my own experience. Now, I mean, I wanted to import pigs and improve my farm again. And then there's this, I go to the bank. I had been banking for 5 years, and I tell them I need to get a loan, and they tell me at that time that no, we don't give agriculture loans. And I'm like, and then this is what the bank manager told me. The bank manager told me, I can give you a loan, you buy a car, and you sell that car so that you can be able to do whatever you want with the farm. And I told him, I don't understand cars, I understand farms, I understand pigs, I understand animals. And so I failed to get a loan in the bank. And then I had to sell a car again somewhere. We had a car. So I had to sell, we had a truck. So we sold the truck, which was having issues. We sold it, and I bought my first pig. I bought this pig, $4,000 from South Africa. But then 1 year down the road, I made money. I made 33 million. So what did it mean? That I already spent that time? I spent 20 million Uganda shillings on the boar, but then I had an extra 13 million Uganda shillings. So if I had actually gotten the loan, I would still have to pay. I would have finished my loan. You get what I'm saying? Right. But because there were issues with that time, even up to now, banks are not really so. There are a few that have actually come up that like DFCU and some other banks, they've come up and they're trying to give us the agricultural loans, but still they're not tailored to the farmer. Because if I want to have a loan, maybe I'm a coffee farmer and maybe it's going to take me so many months. Or like, okay, still I'm a pig farmer. Let me use my experience that I'm a pig farmer. I'll need so many pigs, and in 6 months I'm going to sell. But when I borrow, I'm going to be like any other. I think it's a commercial loan or something, whereby the next month I'm going to start paying. But my pigs have not started producing. So if they are to give us access to finances, can they tailor it to the product you're dealing with, so that? All right. And let me tell you something. One thing, they think farmers are risky. It's a risky. Yes, I know it's risky, but farmers are actually very, what would I say? Trustworthy. They'll always pay back. And then especially when it comes to women. Now, one thing with women, it's very important. Like I said, 60%, like Ogwal said, I think 80% or 60% of the labor in agriculture is from women. Yeah. Okay. Yes. And now these women, there's a lot that goes on. First of all, as you're a farmer and then you're a mother, you're looking after your kids. So there's a big gap. But when you look at the gap, I was reading an article the other day, and I saw that because of women having issues with either not access to finance, no access to land, no access to so many things, we lose 67 in Uganda. We lose 67 million US dollars because of that. And in Tanzania, because maybe there are so many, they lose 105 million US dollars in issues concerning women and not being able to access whatever they need. So right. If we can make sure that these women there, because they are the 80% of them that are farming, if these women can actually access finance, and they can have, they can access finance, they can get educated, then they're going to actually be better people, because they're going to, all they right. can look after their women, their children, they can look after, they can feed their children, and actually at the end of the day, they will feed the nation.
All right, Doctor, I have to stop you there, not because you're out of information to give us, but because we're out of time. I'd like to encourage all the participants, please use the Q&A tab to ask your questions, and not the chat tab, use the Q&A tab. And please don't use the tab to ask Doctor how you can get your kilos of pork from her. We shall use another platform for that. But yes, hearing that price was quite tempting. I almost sent it myself. Okay, we need to move on. But before we do, I mentioned in your introduction that you actually did some work on the president's farm, and it was around improving the genetics of his herd through artificial insemination. Could you just very briefly, in about a minute or so, talk about, the role of improving, the variety of what we have, in our farms, and what effect that can have?
Okay, again, improving genetic, that is still like when you deal with artificial insemination, it's another way to increase productivity. So that means that maybe when you're dealing with our local animals, they're good, but maybe they're not. I'll give you an example. If we are using the local Ankole animal, it's a good animal. It has actually very good beef. But then if you are keeping animals for milk, now they're not milk animals, they're beef animals. So you need to improve their genetic makeup so that you increase milk. So that's why we use artificial insemination. So and artificial insemination is improving genetics using the bull. But there's also what we call embryo transfer, where we improve genetics using the cow, that is the embryo. So we get embryos from the cow, and then we put them in another cow. But this embryo there, that embryo at that particular time, is very good. It has all the good genetics, like for milk. And you just put it in this local animal. And when you put it in this local animal, the product, the local animal is just a bag to carry the embryo. And when it gives birth, it will give birth to an exotic or an improved animal. And then the beauty with it that it will have actually gotten the resistance or the blood in terms of disease resistance. It will have attained disease resistance from this other mother. The same thing with artificial insemination. So you are improving genetics, you are improving genetics of both animals. So the product comes out disease resistant and also with high milk yield, or even if it's pigs, the product may be better pork producing pigs.
All right. Unfortunately, we can't go into details with that, but we can use the Q&A section to respond to the questions that are coming up. And participants, I do see some people have raised their hands. At this moment, I can't take your questions. However, if you type your questions, Dr. and Mr. Ogwal can actually respond, and any other panelist who actually is able to respond to your question will go ahead and do so. So panelists, please take note of the questions coming in. We are also going to have poll questions that will be flashing on your screens, and very soon we're actually going to have one. And what happens is there will be a question. Just pick out your answer. Take about 10, 20 seconds to read what's on your screen, and then you go ahead and check the answer that most applies to you. Panelists, unfortunately, you are the Electoral Commission in this case. Therefore, you do not vote. Even if you try, you will not be able to. You can only view the way people are voting. And the question we have is, can Uganda attain food security and maximize its export capacity without resort to genetic modification? Someone may think Dr. Immaculate is the one who typed that question. But can Uganda attain food security and maximize its export capacity without resort to genetic modification? And many of you say Uganda can attain both without GM. Okay, we have just a few more seconds. At the moment, 70% of you are saying Uganda can attain both without genetic modification. About 25% are saying Uganda can attain food security, but not great export capacity. And only 10% are saying Uganda cannot attain both. All right. I think let's leave that poll. We pretty much have got the opinion of majority of the people on the webinar. I would like now to introduce our next discussant. This is Mr. Ben Twinomugisha Chamuzigita. He is the chairman, Livestock Development Forum. Mr. Ben Twine is the founder and chairman of the Livestock Development Forum, National Livestock Farmers Association of Uganda. Ben is an agribusiness consultant with an MBA in change management and MBA in human resource management from the Netherlands. He is currently pursuing a Master of Science in Livestock Development, Planning and Management, that is sector planning and management, from the College of Veterinary Medicine, Animal Resources and Biosecurity, Makerere University. If you've counted correctly, those are 3 master's degrees. He is a consultant on agribusiness. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me Mr. Ben Twinomugisha Chamuzigita. Over to you, sir. It seems like your connection is not as
Thank you,
good
Gabriel.
as it
My
was earlier.
internet is a
Okay.
bit
Yes, right. I
faint,
just noticed
but I
that. Yes,
hope
but go
and pray
ahead.
that get. Hello. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Your internet is not the very best right now, but can we just?
I hope it gets you so much.
Yes, can we just try without a video, and probably we'll be able to hear you better. All participants have seen who you are. You can go ahead and just mute your video. Excellent. Please go right ahead.
Okay, do you hear me now?
We do. Please go right ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabriel. Also, a vote of thanks to Joshua, and I'm glad to also know and hear that one of PF members, Dr. Kwatampola, are also engaging here, and that's really great. I won't go much into the general picture of agriculture because at least Emma did, Joshua did. I will probably try to zero on what Joshua put out there, and pretty much go into the life. I would like to focus on that. Gabriel, am I audible?
Well, now
Yes.
it has become
Do
better.
you hear
Let's
me?
try that. Okay, Mr. Twine, let's invite another. Mr. Twine, just a second. Let's invite another discussant. Let's invite another discussant, and I will invite you right after the discussant I'm going to invite right now. Hopefully by then your internet connection will be better. Let me just have a small communication with the technical team as well and see if there's a way in which we can support. But for now, let me invite Mrs. Josephine Mukumbia. She is Group Chief Executive Officer at Agricultural Business Initiative. Josephine is the Group Chief Executive Officer of Agribusiness Initiative, ABI, a social enterprise founded by the governments of Uganda and Denmark to promote private sector agribusiness development to enhance wealth creation in Uganda. She holds a master's degree in banking and finance for development from the Fondazione Giordano dell'Amor. It's an Italian word, so I haven't yet practiced my Italian. And she is a certified coach, credentialed by the International Coach Federation as an associate certified coach. She's also a member of the International Coach Federation body. She is an experienced professional in financial portfolio management, business planning, risk management, capacity development, coaching, and networking across culturally. She has a proven track record of superior performance in 5 financial institutions and 1 international development agency in varied roles as executive. She's worked in development agencies in varied roles as an executive director, a chief credit officer, a chief risk officer, and a senior private sector development advisor. Josephine leads the team at ABI to promote private sector investment in agribusiness through grant support for inventions that are designed to address specific constraints identified in 6 priority agro value chains. At the same time, ABI also promotes access to agricultural financing through the use of varied financial instruments and inclusive strategies to the sustainable development of agribusiness in Uganda. She's a member of the board of directors at Housing Finance Bank, the premier mortgage financier in Uganda. She also chairs the Female Future Association Alumni Board, an entity established to mentor and coach young women into leadership positions. Mrs. Mukumbia, you are welcome to give us your discussion.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. I'll pick my cue from Joshua, but before I do that, I would like to really thank the Castle think tank that this is really a good idea. It's a way in which we can really harness ideas, and our work is cut out for us. Once we get these ideas, how do we get them implemented? So that the tougher thing is also the implementation, but at least we need to acknowledge and thank the Castle think tank that this forum is happening. And yes, I hadn't known about the other two sector discussions, but I will email, as you've advised, to connect at castlethinktank.org and get to know more, because COVID has really thrown at us the interconnectivity of these subsectors, or these sectors actually, because clearly transport has thrown up disruptions even in the agribusiness that looked like it was least affected, but when it boiled down to it, if the transporters cannot actually connect the matoke farmers to market, then there are challenges there. There's some disruptions there. So if the tourism has collapsed completely and the hotels are not open, definitely our matoke prices, our egg prices, our milk prices are also affected. So their interconnectivity indeed means that much as we're looking at agriculture, we need to also appreciate the linkage with all the other sectors. So I thank you very much for this opportunity. Gabriel has already mentioned what we do at ABI, so I'll jump into kind of looking at the recommendations and the analysis and the assumptions that Joshua made in coming up with his paper and good presentation. So I'll take it from the top about the opportunity in all of this. Yes, we could sit down and cry about COVID, but I think what is clearly coming up from this particular forum is that there are opportunities that we can pick up. And I'll use the examples that I've seen clearly here. There's digital steps that we've always planned to do as ABI or as organizations, and we are still analyzing, assessing the risk, trying to see how can it be practical that remotely we can do X, Y, Z. Well, in a matter of weeks or months, we were able to really jumpstart all these processes and ensure that the risk is still mitigated. So in a way, the pandemic has brought our thinking caps on, and it has caused us to actually, get out of our comfort zones and move on. So I'll give an example of a farmer app we've been thinking about here to support us in data collection remotely, to support us in getting down and giving support from a monitoring perspective, traceability of the farmers, really validating that the information is coming from the farmers and it is not, created. And this particular season has caused us to expedite and get a move on to having this app come out within the quarter, at least this quarter that we are sitting with, to have a pilot happen. And we see a lot of potential there. We can see that even extension and traceability can be enhanced and can be improved on this same platform. It's not what we are starting with, but indeed it can open up. Once the pilot does pick up and take on well, it can open up to having a better appreciation of the smallholder farmer out there. Many of the challenges Joshua pointed to are coming from the fact that much as it's a big percentage, it is widespread all over the country, the countryside. And so it poses risk for any banker, for any financier, for any distributor, even if it's a private sector player, running around the countryside to pick a few matoke, or maybe that's not a good example, to pick a few kilograms of coffee as an exporter of coffee is not practical. So what happens is that you get an intermediary, and much as we may not love them, that's when the middle people come in and harness the opportunity. But indeed, the pandemic is opening up the road for e-commerce. It's opening up the road for improved traceability through digitization. And we are getting a move of it just like other institutions are doing. And it also has pointed to the support that we may not usually look at, like the logistical support. So particularly, we are now working around the area of who links us to markets, like the transporters when they have issues, and what kind of support, what kind of funding window can we think about around the logistical elements that lead us to our farmers to markets. So in a way, it's causing us to create forums and better appreciation of who are our stakeholders when we are looking at interventions that are going to promote agriculture, that are going to promote production and productivity of the farmers. It's causing us to widen our net when we are interacting with stakeholders, because we don't know it all. And if we are to really quite appreciate what is that hurdle in this particular stakeholder, we need to pick the right stakeholders on the table. So the pandemic did show that to us. In the more medium and long term, because some of these things cannot happen right away, it is actually pointing us to get back to the basic infrastructure, because maybe we speak a lot about a value addition in terms of a big processor coming in, and maybe the financing may not all be together, the environment may not be appreciated by a private sector out there, an FDI flowing in, but it is pointing us to looking at drying, storage, aggregation centers, things we've always been doing, but more localized level. Like you pointed out, I think like Joshua pointed out, the task ahead of us is big, and maybe all of us, our budgets are limited in a way. But collectively, if fora like this can cause a collaboration that can arrive at, the issue right now is in drying. Because, if we can, or is in storage, let's say cereals, that is a known area in cereals, the issue of storage. So on the one hand, sometimes the capacity is not utilized, but then on the other hand, and in the other seasons, there is a lot of wastage because there's a lack of storage. So that conversation at the table is going to cause us meaningful storage, basic storage for farmers at their level, which gets to them, but also when they aggregate it, the storage at the processor level. And we have specific interventions that we've already done with partners to date. And now the issue is, how do we replicate these same projects across the country? And that's a conversation we are having and looking at. It has also shown us opportunities in delivering of stimuli. This is a conversation that has been in the papers. Stimulus packages, a couple of days ago, our president gave a speech, and still speaking to other stimuli coming through. And the argument was that the food delivery system versus the mobile phone system. And once again, it goes back to the traceability. If we do not have a cascading model, if we do not have the appreciation of all these smallholders, as well as maybe all of our people, it may really be hard. It was proven hard to physically deliver food. But we can look beyond that, not just as a government, but even in our private sector-led organizations, and look at how we can cascade more through mobile apps, through farmer apps, because at least it can really, it has good traceability, it has good accountability, and it is more transparent. And I think that the example of Kenya versus the example of Uganda, where we distributed physical food, is very telling. I would like to speak about the area of financing in terms of the argument that Joshua put forward, that we really need to look at cooperatives, and we really need to see how we can support or have the setup of an ag bank, basically. So the paper that he gave us speaks to setting aside a bank like UDB and developing it into an ag bank. This is something that has been on the floor for discussion for about the last 6 years. It has its merits. it's the demerits are also pointed out. I believe it's a very welcome idea. But to put things in context, when we look at how widespread our farmers are, I would fall back to the issue of the cooperatives and the apex bodies of the cooperatives. That fine, we could have that single institution, which is very fine, that is the Ag Bank, but because we are so widespread as smallholders all over the countryside, we also need at the same time, we need to take a two-pronged approach. We need to also lift up the co-ops, and the co-ops are actually much closer to our smallholders than the bigger institutions are. However, the bigger institutions also have their place. They have their risk appetite, and they have their balance sheets. They have the muscle to give you the financing for the, what example can I give? For say Alpha Sun in Namamve to set up. They have the muscle to do that, which a SACCO can never have. So I think we need to look at financial services development across all of the tiers. And whenever we invite the financial services into our forum and we keep putting them down and saying they don't understand the risk and they don't, I think it may be self-defeating for the goal where we want to get. We need to bring them up. In the last 10 years of ABI, I've seen a radical change in how the partnerships we had with financial institutions in 2011 versus now. Now, the association of the Uganda Bankers Association can sit and have a whole conference that is based on agriculture. Why? Because they see the opportunity. They just need to be pointed and supported to actually act on it. And they see the risks, actually. That's sometimes that they are running away from those risks. And some of those risks are because we are all so widespread. But as Joshua points out, how can they then link to the circles that are closer to those who are widespread? So I can give an example of the Uganda Central Cooperative Financial Services. This is UCAFS in short, and UCAFS is an apex body of circles. So before the pandemic, we were we had our criteria. We had cut it out and said to a great, if a circle is not yet this size, and if it is not doing this, and if its non-performing assets are like this, we actually do not deal with it, but we first give it technical capacity and build it from UCAS. But the pandemic, as I pointed out, it has caused us to leapfrog some of these things. So quickly we saw, when we did a survey through our partnerships, we saw that the circles were actually less prepared with their business continuity plans. They were more open to liquidity challenges because the savers only had their savings to withdraw. So they could easily much more collapse. So even though they were not fitting the criteria like we knew it, we've quickly come up with another approach of how do we give them relief out of this situation so that then we build them to survive for their farmers, for their savers going forward. So the pandemic indeed gives the opportunities. Thank you.
All right, so Dr. Immaculate raised the issue around, you're rearing cattle or pigs. And when you go to the traditional institutions, financial institutions, you take a loan, and a month from the time you take the loan, they're expecting you to start paying back. But because of the nature of agriculture, you need that period of whether it is crops, them growing, if it's animals, of them, getting to the point where they reproduce and you're able to. You haven't touched that aspect, the understanding that when you're financing agribusiness, agriculture, it's a bit different from the typical, financing in other sectors.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. And as I said earlier, that is part of the support or the direction we need to give to financial institutions. So in your introduction, you pointed out that we take a two-pronged approach, and one of it is technical assistance, and the other one is the provision of the loans and the de-risking mechanism. So part of the technical assistance is the support to product development, product refinement, and inherent in that is looking at such aspects like you're speaking about. And I may not say the names right now, but indeed, even on the back of the conference that they had a couple of years ago, which was about agriculture. An action list was drawn for financial institutions and the steps they were going to take. An action list was drawn for government, and now it was going to support policy. But within the action list for financial institutions, indeed, it is to refine their products, be clear about their risk appetite, so that Josephine should not have to queue up in an institution which is clearly not providing facilities up to 50 million. She should be clear from the onset that when I go to this institution, this is what it does, and those are the products, and this is what I should get. And over the years, we are seeing improvement in this area. Is there room for more? Definitely, yes. And the more of this feedback we give them and support them, I believe that landscape would improve. But if you could allow me, the issue of just having the one ag bank, it does not allow for the diversification of the risk of that bank. And history will tell us that that bank has suffered before in that regard. However, it also gives the opportunity for the muscle, the financial muscle for the rest of the industry to edge up their portfolios even a little bit of 6 trillion in Stanbic, even if it's 2%, can go a long way to support the processors.
All right.
Yeah, and a little bit in, say, Pride Microfinance can go a long way to also support the farmers. Yeah.
All right. Let me borrow from you the term action list. One of the things I hope we can come up with is an action list from this webinar to different, actors on what they can be doing in the short term, in the long term, in order to take this sector where we actually can see it can go. Thank you very much for that presentation. Let's go back to Mr. Ben Twine Chamuzikita, who I introduced as a chairman, Livestock Development Forum, and he is a consultant on agri-business. His network was not very clear earlier on. I hope it is better now. Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Gabriel.
All right, let's hear from you, sir.
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, I can. Please go right ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much for again giving me the opportunity, and my apologies for my internet. I'd like to thank Mrs. Josephine for a clear approach and the two-pronged approach. I'd like to thank Joshua for putting up a good presentation. And I will start from, we all know what agriculture is. We all know what, every one of us here, at least his life or her life has been brought up and impacted by agriculture. So it's not only the backbone of the economy, but it's the backbone of a life and livelihood. Now I will focus mainly on the livestock sector. There are two sectors. There's the crop sector and the livestock sector in the subsectors. And it so happens that much of the effort and of financing, programming, government, all government parastatals and institutions focus or have shifted the focus in the past years to mainly the crop sector. And somehow the livestock sector has not attracted much attention because maybe there's little or less lobbying from the livestock sector. Now, in any change management, be it financial, be it economical, there are two forces or two areas. One is planned change, another one is emergent change. So we seem to be probably now focusing on, we come out to actually address problems other than addressing the causes to the problems that we get. Now, case in point is what Joshua clearly put out. If we have no organized farmer groups, then it's very, very difficult for Mrs. Josephine or ABI or any institution to actually plug into and see what they can do. Now, there is, I would say, an approach or a kind of approach that will would probably be looking at. One, there's the top-down approach, which is everyone thinking is the best, including the government Tuyambe slogan, and every farmer thinks, or everyone thinks it's about the government. But I think as a farmer, I believe in the bottom-up approach. They both have a major line. If the bottom-up then even that. What do I mean by this? The government has to plan to actually engage farmers, engage value chain players, engage all stakeholders in their own capacity to see where they can plug in, other than sit, think for farmers, and act for farmers, but we rather have to think with farmers and act with farmers. If I look at Joshua's inline of, let's say, the milk industry or the milk industry example, Uganda now is exporting, or the production is up to 2.5 billion liters of milk per year. If you really, and this is compared to what we have 15 million cattle, we have 16 million goats, we have 4.5 million sheep, we have 47.6 million of birds, poultry, we have 4.1 million of pigs. But what are we getting out of that? Out of, for example, the dairy sector, or subsector, out of 15 million cattle, what are we getting? Compared to, let's say, the smallest country, New Zealand, which has 4.9 million cattle, but it's getting the production of 20.7 billion liters of milk. So saying that we have too much production of milk and we don't have the market, we actually have the market, but we don't plan for the market. We plan for the production because it is the farmer who has, it's a bottom-up approach impact, because it is the farmer who actually puts in a lot. The government has done a great work in availing the investors, but they are still too small compared to what we would produce. We have 15 million children, but who actually don't access the milk. They spend 9 months at school, 3 months at home. They can only have milk or access milk or dairy products at home for 3 months. Every month they're at home. When they're at school, they only have probably juice and sodas, and which are not nutritious enough. So we find that in the way of not increasing our local consumption, we lose the market, we lose health impact on our children, we lose local consumption growth, we lose the economic dependence. So we need to look at both the down approaches, increased farmer mobilization, increased farmer mapping, so that whoever wants to plug in, like Mrs. Josephine, or whoever wants to plug in, like Castle, whoever wants to plug in, like any other, or DeFi, or any other investor, they know where to plug in. If a bank or an institution deals with a cooperative, for instance, it has more, there's less risk than when it is dealing with an individual farm. So we need to mobilize our farmers, but not only mobilizing, but the two areas that we really need to emphasize on. Farmer mapping, to know where the farmer is, what does the farmer do, so that increases the farmer traceability, which will actually give us more market for export, more opportunities for export markets, more demand more supply that will actually use or increase our cash flows, and then the financial institution will be willing to take the risk. Other than that, then farmers are on their own, institutions are on their own. They don't want to engage, and the government is doing all that it can.
Mm.
But then at the end of the day, we keep in the cycle.
Okay.
Thirdly, there seems to be a gap between research and farming or agriculture in general. There's a gap. There's a missing link between, for instance, what is at Makerere, who is at Makerere, who is at Castle, how much research has been done on the milk sector or the dairy sector, who is an authority there, and what can we learn from them? We have a lot of resourceful people in these institutions. Take an example of Makerere University. When I joined the MLD program, there is a lot of resourceful people there, but they've not been tapped. For instance, why do we have to really keep increasing and buying in the exotic animals? We have our local cows. Can we look at how to harness and improve our, let's say, Ankole dairy cow instead of the exotic? Because it has been here for ages, it has tested the environment, it has all the advantages. I know this is probably, if we tapped into the resources at Makerere, for example, to improve the local dairy cow for regional inclusion. Let's say Zebu. How can we improve a Zebu dairy cow? How can we improve an Ankole dairy cow? How, because those breeds can actually, they have adopted to our environment. Our farmers know how to deal with them. Our vets and the education system know how to deal with them. So that would help us to actually maybe take low risks even for the financial institutions. Lastly, is it possible to also focus? Because we've dealt with theories so much. Theories in education, theories in our curriculum, theories in all setting. Is it possible to now focus on hands-on agriculture like Dr. Nalima is doing and said? I'm glad that she's here, and Mike, these are our LDF members. But we need to have or instill or embrace skilling Uganda than just having a vet who actually has never done a practical surgery, for instance, on a cow. If we skilled our students, if we skilled our youth and women, then we're creating employment. If in Uganda, it's in Europe, for instance, you will find a graph. The bottom line is actually the bigger population are skilled people, certificates, then followed by diplomas, followed by the small apex, which are degrees and specialists. But in Uganda, it's the other way around. You find so many degrees, small, medium certificates, rather diplomas, and few certificates, which are basically skilled. So if we would basically embrace skills, embrace cooperatives and unions,
Right.
embrace bottom-up approach, embrace engaging farmers. Yes, the agri bank, it will come with time.
Okay. Excellent.
But it will come with time. But before it comes, how can we actually harness the little monies the institutions that are there to help us? Because we also need the financial institutions to start thinking with farmers, but not seeing them as risks. Because the relationship is, the banks don't follow a farmer to see what they are doing. In financial institutions, all they care about is how they can get their money back. So
Yes.
with
All right.
increased embracement of that and farmer institution involvement, bottom-up approach, top-down approach, we would be really taking this far. Lastly,
All right.
just last point is when you look at the dairy sector that Joshua mentioned, when you look at the price, the milk price fluctuation, it's actually at the farm gate. It's not in the supermarket or the end game. You are buying 3,000 a liter of milk from the supermarket at 3,000 for the last 4 years. Well, I'm selling my liter of milk at 400, 300. A couple of months ago, it was even at 250, 200 in some areas. So what does that mean? It means there's a cartel which is actually taking the gap of lack of united and cooperative society to actually demand or have the power and the volume to bargain. So we need to get that sorted out from the bottom line and then going up. Thank you.
All right. And thank you very much for that presentation, Mr. Twine. I hope all the panelists are taking note of what's being submitted, because our time is really running quickly, and yet there are very many important things that are coming up that we'd like you to respond to. So when we next give you a chance to speak, if you could just touch on some of the things that fall in your sector, we'll be glad. But don't forget to use the Q&A tab, because participants are putting their questions there, and many of the questions are actually in relation to what you have shared with us. So please go ahead and respond to the questions that are in the Q&A tab. Participants, don't worry. Whatever is being discussed in the Q&A tab is being monitored, and therefore we're going to use those in the final document that we come up with. If you're on Facebook or Twitter, thank you for joining this discussion. We are using the hashtags Castle Webinar and Thrive Agriculture, Thrive Food Value Chain. So those are the hashtags that we are using. We have another poll question. If we could just take the poll, and I just remind the panelists that unfortunately you cannot vote, but the participants can vote. And this time we're talking about climate change policy. And the question is climate change policy a valid issue for the food value chain? Please go ahead and vote. The options are 3, which is yes, very important, yes, but not so important, worth considering. The third is worth considering, but should not interfere with expanded productive capacity. Majority of you are saying climate change is very important. And at the moment, about 10% are saying, well, it's worth considering, but should not interfere with expanded productive capacity. So the question is climate change policy a valid issue for the food value chain? We shall just allow a few more seconds as I go ahead and introduce our next discussant, our next and final discussant for this segment before we hear from our special guest. We're going to hear from Mr. Dan Namanya Takwetsire. He is the Executive Director for Integrated Development Options, IDO, a national NGO engaged in offering rural development services in Uganda. He is a specialist in agricultural rural development, a sector he has worked in for over 20 years. He has worked with several international and national development agencies and organizations in Uganda in different capacities. He holds a Master of Science degree in agricultural rural development from University College Dublin, National University of Ireland. He has hands-on as he routinely engages and interacts with rural farmers. His main focus is on household income improvement through agriculture. Mr. Namanya, you are welcome. Just before you speak, the results of the poll are as follows. 80% of you said climate change is very important. 6% said yes, it's important, but not it. Yes, it is. It should be considered, but is not so important. And 14% of you said it's worth considering, but should not interfere with expanded productive capacity. Thank you very much for taking the poll. We probably will have one more poll question. Mr. Namanya, you are welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are hearing you. We can hear you and we can see you. Go right ahead.
Fine, thank you so much. I'd like to add my voice onto those that have already spoken. Thank Castle for organizing this wonderful platform. And I would like to start with thanking Mr. Gwar for a nice trigger, because he has given us really very wonderful trigger we are responding to. I start with some of these questions regarding the subject matter. That have we, as a nation, as a country, learned anything from this COVID situation? Two, that can we, as a nation or as a country, do business unusual? And three, is there anything to show that agriculture is the backbone of this nation, as it is widely stated? Many times we hear this, but is there anything to show that truly agriculture is the backbone of our economy? Those questions apart, I would like to add on a few assumptions on what Mr. Gwar had. I would like to assume that the government is willing to increase the budget support for agriculture if it is the backbone of this country. That the population has realized that agriculture has the potential to move this country as a major development driver. That the policymakers are willing to put in place enabling policies and frameworks that will propel growth of the agricultural industry. And that there will be a deliberate effort to encourage and protect our enormous value chain industries. That is to add on the assumptions that Mr. Ogwar had. A lot has been said, and I would like to concur with almost everybody that talked. But we need to move a step from talking to action. And what is missing in this business, especially after COVID. If we have realized that things can change, then we need to show that change in practice. For example, when you talk of farmers and being organized, yes, it's true that presently farmers are mostly organized at a group level. So what is a group? How big is it? What influence can it have on policy, on market? So when we talk about this is what we mean, that we need big organized muscle that will prepare our agricultural industry to further heights. Because groups are more or less like individuals. They cannot influence things the way cooperatives do. So we need to ensure that the cooperative aspect, that we organize farmers, that will enable training to occur in these groups managed by the cooperatives, that the funding we are talking about can go through cooperatives. For example, when you talk about Uganda Development Corporation or Uganda Development Bank, it is far away from the rural farmers we are talking about, those who are producing. They cannot access it. But through cooperatives, as it were, it is very easy for farmers to access agricultural funding. Then we need to ensure that we promote cottage industries. This is a missing gap in our agriculture sector. A lot is produced, but if we could make sure that we have cottage industries at a local level, and then through these cooperatives, we ensure quality control, then what is being produced will be added onto value. And farmers will definitely benefit from it. We have a challenge with the production. We are basically, as a country, blessed with rain, but we are unable to harness that rain. Farmers do not have water for production, irrigation systems, and so on. So there is a need for us to invest in water for production so that we all have production throughout the years. We are not looking at the rain. When it doesn't come, then we don't produce, then it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think it's high time, as a country, we thought about promoting water for production. Then research has been talked about, but there is a missing gap between research and farmers. Who informs the research questions? How often have the researchers gone down to interface with the farmers to find out their problems? And when they have developed anything from their research, how often do these researchers go down to inform the population about what they have researched, so that these farmers can benefit from it, because they're the ones who are going to implement? So you find a research station like Naro or any other, maybe it may be in the region, but when you go there, you'll find them very busy doing research here and there. But do farmers know? Are the farmers beneficiaries of this research? Do they inform the research questions? So these are things that we should look at and make sure that they prepare our agricultural sector. Uganda is blessed with a very useful population. I think about 3/4 of our population is youth. But what are we doing with our youth? You'll find most of them, if you go to these urban areas, the youth that would be in agriculture are now in a border business. I'm not belittling border business. But if we take it that agriculture is the backbone of our economy, and these youth are not into agriculture, agriculture is left for the elderly who are 50 years and above. So what will happen after they are unable to practice agriculture? So if it is a backbone of our economy as a country, I think there should be a deliberate effort to make sure that as many youth as possible are engaged in agriculture production. they own up the whole chain of production and processing, so that there is a continuity from one generation to another. But the way it is now, you don't find the elderly are the ones who are engaged in agriculture. And to me, that is something to worry about. Then our infrastructure. If, for me, I am talking from a rural-based experience, most of our feeder roads are honestly wanting. So if something is produced somewhere in the village, it is very difficult to be transported to the town centers. And that is why, for example, you'll find that the agricultural products are fetched very low from the farm gate, because this middleman will talk about the transport costs.
Right.
So we really need to make sure that we harmonize all these factors that prepare the industry to make sure that it is seen that agriculture is the backbone of our economy. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Namanya. I'd like to encourage Dr. Namanya and all the other panelists, please visit the Q&A tab. There are a number of questions there. Dr. Immaculate, thank you very much for responding. Mr. Twine, thank you very much for responding to the questions there. Joshua, there are a number of questions for you that are still pending. Please visit the tab section and respond to those questions. It is now the time where we invite our special guest. On our flyer, we did inform you that the Honorable Vincent Sempija, the Minister of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries, was supposed to be our special guest, but unfortunately, he got called away by official duty. But he did delegate a very able person from the ministry, who I'm going to introduce in a bit. This is Dr. Patience Ramegisa. He is a Commissioner, Agricultural Extension and Skills Management at the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries. He has served for 25 years in the public service in various roles, including at local government level. He is a visiting scholar at the University of Hohenheim in Germany and is the architect of the current agricultural reform system, the design of the new agricultural extension policy, and he is a guest lecturer at Makerere University. He is a Doctor of Philosophy, that's PhD, Agricultural Extension Education, I believe, graduate, and he is also a research partner with International Food Policy Research Institute in the area of agricultural extension. He has published extensively in a number of international journals. Dr. Ramegisa, you are welcome.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you as well.
Okay, that's good. Yes, thank you very much. I've been attentively listening to the issues that have been raised by the panelists. I was also very happy with the keynote speaker, Joshua, who raised very fundamental policy issues. Dr. Nalima, I'm very happy for your insights. Josephine, you have been good at articulating the issues of agribusiness. Then you have really given us a very good analysis in terms of farmer organizations and the neglect of the livestock sector. Then you have also raised the important issues on the issues of getting, agri-industrial development through cottage industries and also focusing on issues of farmer institutional development. I'll give my issues really from the policy perspective in view of all this discussion. And what I can say is that we have, as a Ministry of Agriculture, we have all this period of time of COVID, we have also been trying to study and assess what needs to be done. Because the COVID environment, you know, we are being faced with all these disasters have come at the same time. I don't know what we did to God. Because the COVID-19, the desert locusts, the rising water levels and flooding, all these things have come at the same time. And therefore, as Dan said, we cannot keep business as usual. So we have to find a way of how, from the policy perspective, deal with this in a more systematic and organized way. The issues you have raised are important. One, as the Ministry of Agriculture, we're looking at how do we keep ourselves food secure. Food secure in terms of safety, affordability, and accessibility. How do we become self-reliant? We have undertaken some rapid assessments and observed that actually we even import a lot of food. And yet we need that hard foreign currency for our economy. And therefore, we are also looking at how do you deal with issues of import substitution? Because our debt burden is increasing. And actually, it is only agriculture that has the potential to deal with this debt burden. So we are looking as a ministry, how do we look? We are looking at food security, self-reliance, import substitution. So previously, we when you assess through what you have throughout the discussion, there are key things that which rhyme with our findings as a ministry. Because if you look at the sectors to be organized along value chains, agricultural value chains. And therefore, at each node of the value chain, we have to get well organized. And the first is to have organized production. For you to have organized production, as has raised out of this debate, you need to get, first of all, the producers organized, the other value chain actors organized, and ensuring that there is investment consistent to ensure that there is market and industry. So the National Development Plan, which has now been finalized, the NDP3, has prioritized agro-industrialization as the centerpiece to spur economic growth. But for that agro-industrialization to take place, it means that you must make sure that the industries are well linked to production. So that the markets are well linked to production. Now, all this requires a lot of effort. And as I said from the beginning, we cannot do these things business as usual. So what we have also observed, at community level, even the production systems have to change. We can't surely continue relying on the hoe as our major tool of production. when I was doing my PhD, the issue of the hoe came out very prominently in my work, and one policymaker observed that, before the British came here, they came and found us with a hoe. They ruled us for 70 years, and they left us with a hoe. We have ruled ourselves for more than 50 years, and we are still using the hoe as a rudimentary, as a major tool of production. That the only difference between the hoe that the British found us with and the hoe we are currently using is that the current one is imported. So meaning that actually we have retrogressed. So the issue of getting farm implements at community level that are labor saving is critical. The issue of organizing farmers, this has raised a lot of debate here, because the collapse of the cooperative movement actually disadvantaged the farmers so much. And therefore, there has to be an effort made to revival, and these issues are being being prepared in a ministry policy document, which will soon be probably tabled to cabinet. Revival of the cooperatives is very important, because until there is no country that has transformed its agriculture without farmers organized into cooperatives. There is no country that has transformed its agriculture without sufficient investments in the extension service delivery systems. So, but the extension is a knowledge management tool for transfer of technologies from global research institutions to farming communities. And therefore, for us to get the systems work, we must make this extension service functional, because it is a tool for mobilizing the farmers, a tool that brings, it's a software. What we have been largely, the investments currently have largely been focusing on the hardware, because you will get agricultural inputs, you carry them, you give farmers. But the farmers need the knowledge on how to use those inputs. And that knowledge can only be delivered by the extension service. The other aspect, of course, is the quality of the inputs themselves. Because without quality inputs, we cannot talk about food security, we cannot talk about nutrition security and what. So the sector has been characterized, these liberalization policies we undertook without sufficiently putting in strong regulatory measures has led to adulteration of all these agricultural inputs on the markets. And therefore, we have to address the issue of inputs. Because it is very sad for a farmer to spend all his energy and time to plant his garden, to clear his garden, and then you supply him seeds that don't germinate. You can imagine the economic loss he's incurring, but also what the country is incurring. So these are very fundamental that we need. Issue of inputs, we have to address it very well. Now, from the policy perspective, the private sector is supposed to really to be the driver in the input systems. But when we liberalized the seed sector, we have about more than 35 companies that emerged that are involved in issues of seed. But you'll find that even out of that, only about maybe 20 companies that are active. But they're also struggling because the issue of agricultural credit is a problem. So how do we deal, because this, you can no longer, you have to address the issues of agriculture in a more holistic way. And in this new era, we must look at, you can no longer address the issues of agriculture in a piecemeal fashion. They must be addressed holistically. So the issue of agricultural credit is important. And if you listened carefully yesterday, in the State of the Nation address, His Excellency the President has emphasized that for us, these agribusiness businesses must be supported with credit that is friendly. Commercial banks cannot offer credit that can get agriculture. Because even you look in the developed world, agriculture is heavily subsidized by governments. It's not by accident, because the risks in agriculture are very high, and therefore we need to get, they have to be mitigated. And therefore you need a lot of public sector investments in agriculture for the private sector to make profit. So if your public sector is not putting money in agriculture, if you're not doing sufficient investments in agriculture, it becomes very difficult for the private sector to thrive. So these are key fundamental issues that have to be addressed. And I've told you we have to address these things holistically. The other issue I wish to, the issue of post-harvest handling, because we are experiencing a lot of food losses. And even whatever is even eventually developed, if you observe that even what eventually comes to the market does not meet the standards. If you observe the Honorable Tveru was complaining, all the food he was, much of the food he bought for the supply was condemned by Uganda National Bureau of Standards, because the aflatoxin levels were very high, not fit for human consumption. So it means that we have to address these issues. So the issue of post-harvest handling, and these things are not addressed if you have organized production. And as a ministry, guided by His Excellency the President, we have identified, around, we said if you focus on around 10 value chains, 14 value, the President identified 14, what he called 14 production lines. And said if we just put resources in these, you will be able to generate resources for this country. Because if you look at the demand that is likely to arise from the food alone, even in the regional market here, because we anticipate a food shortage, because the desert locusts have ravaged Ethiopia, they have ravaged Kenya, Somalia. Now, definitely are expecting food shortages in the medium term, and therefore we must position ourselves on how do we tap into that kind of opportunity. So, but now, to address all these issues also as a stakeholders, we also need to look at how the mindset changes. Because when you look at in agriculture, is also looked at as a last resort for most. That's why Dan was saying these borders, they prefer to go in that industry than agriculture. But the reason is that you have to modernize agriculture for these young people to come into it. It's the technologies that are taking them the other side also exist in agriculture. What can we do to attract these young people to come into agriculture? And that's where the issues of getting equipment, modern equipment that can attract them, so that if a young man can also drive a tractor in the place and he is hired by farmers, and instead of being hired to ride the people in the town, he can be hired by farmers to ride the tractor in the villages. So these technologies exist, but what kind of incentives do we need to create to get these people into that? So the issue of ICT, the use of drones, the use of all these things can attract young people into agriculture, provide these services. So we have not harnessed all these to shoot out what kind of strategic investments we need to do to attract these young people to go into to come and into the sector. Because all the technologies that can get these young people exist. So, and that's why we're saying we can no longer do things business as usual. So I don't want to, but these are the key issues which I've been able to synthesize from the discussions that have done. But what we need to do as of now, one is that we are looking at streamlining the policy. You know, if you have to get the policy, you have to get research that feeds the policy. Research must be based on the realities that exist at community level, because so that you are able to develop products that meet the needs of the community. Not this, you know, much of the research we have been doing is donor-driven, not demand-driven from the community.
Yes.
So, and because we have not done a lot in investment in research, we rely on donor financing. You have to do research that suits the donor needs than the community needs.
Right.
We have to reverse that, and that has to be done because we can no longer. This COVID environment has exposed us. So we need to link research with extension, with farmers, with industry, so that the whole problem identification and problem solving mechanism is put in place. So, from the ministry perspective, we have said we need to do that. Two, we need to do digitalizing agriculture. There is no way we're going to run about it. You are talking about getting understanding the farmers, registering farmers. All these things can be done digitally, and the solutions exist. But what we need to do is building that capacity, strengthening our agricultural education institutions, so that the graduates that are coming there are relevant to the contemporary development challenges of our farming communities.
Mm.
So, so strengthening the farm organizations, digitalizing agriculture, now strengthening the coordination and making the ministry a stronger institution, take leadership and coordinate the sector are very crucial.
All right.
And those are the issues. Some of these are issues that have been raised in our policy paper that will soon be tabled in cabinet. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And actually, what you've raised on, you know, the whole issue of donor-driven research and having to focus on research that that is really based on the needs we have as a country is something we've agreed to as CASO. We discussed it at the last webinar, and it's a recommendation we're making to government. So it will be good to hear how much money you know, government is planning to put to research in relation to the agriculture sector. But I'd like to find out from you this ministerial policy document that is going to be tabled before cabinet. What research did you rely on to inform it? Also, during this webinar, we've talked about the importance of data and you know, knowing who is where and what service they need and how government should come in. What data sources have you been relying on so that, like you said, it's not business as usual?
Yes, we have definitely relied. Our paper is really evidence-based, and the Economic Policy Research Center, for example, did a lot of studies on 14 value chains and provided a very data showed the gaps. It showed even the global demands for the different commodities, and you know the issue that the prioritization also has to change. If I, for example, I made if you look at even if you just go to Google and look at what are the most agricultural valuable commodities in the world, get it? Rice is number one. milk, meat. These are the commodities that top on the agenda. But we have, for us here, in terms of, we have a lot of potential for those commodities, but we have continued to rely on the traditional crops, coffee, cotton. But we need, so we have to be more strategic in thinking and planning. So we have reviewed a lot of literature, data, both global and local, and we have also been informed by local research from our respective institutions.
Okay. One of the things we saw with the budget process, and the budget will be read next week, is that the budget didn't really take the due consideration of the changes that COVID had brought in. I hope this is not the case with this policy document, because COVID has caused us to think critically about certain plans we already had. Has it affected this policy document that you're tabling before Cabinet?
Well, the budget process started before COVID came, and people were doing things as business as usual. And so the budget process went on, and our systems demand that you have to follow those processes. But by the time the budget process was concluded, this problem emerged, and I think that's why the government now asked the Minister of Agriculture to come up with a clear strategic direction to see how we can now, because if a budget is almost approved, you cannot change it so quickly. Probably can go for supplementary budgets in the next year to address some of the gaps. So the aim of this paper is looking at it has identified both the immediate interventions and the medium-term interventions, and actually it has recommended that in addition to the current provisions within the sector, the medium-term expenditure that has been provided in the sector, they are recommending over and above that, actually over the next 5 years. Of course, the paper is still a draft. It's not yet for public debate. But the issue is that as a ministry, we require almost 9 trillion shillings over the next 5 years, in addition to existing provisions. So we think that if we are able to get additional resources, because the problems have accumulated over a long period of time because of underfunding. So the system, you can imagine this country was able to export meat by 1970. We're exporting meat to Europe. But we are finding difficulties now because the investments in the system, all the systems are not functioning. So you only have to make sure that you do systematic investments over a period of time in order to be able to access the high premium markets. For you to access high premium markets, you have to do a lot of investments. Why should Botswana have only 3 million animals and they're able to export a lot of meat to Europe? We have 14 and we can't export. So these are issues that we have systematically. There are bottlenecks that must be unlocked, and it can't be done in a short time because the underfunding of the sector has been on for a long time. But you cannot even the issue that government has been prioritizing the infrastructure.
All right.
But now they have said sufficient resources are at least the infrastructure. Now everybody can see that there is improvement in infrastructure. And our argument now is we now need to move from infrastructure and support agriculture. Because once we support agriculture, we shall even be able to build infrastructure without getting loans.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for those responses. And I like that you've said the document is still a draft. I believe CASO is willing to share with you this document and the ideas that have come out of this discussion, and probably can feed into the policy document that you're coming up with. We now would like to focus on the questions coming in, but Commissioner at the bottom of your screen is a Q&A tab. If you just click that, there are questions that people have been sending. You can respond to the questions there. We shall be able to read some of them. Joanita, I see your hand is up, but please type your question. We don't have much time for the questions, unfortunately. But right now, I'd like to welcome Dr. Julian Omala, who is going to just very briefly, put in context some of the things that have been raised and probably a question or two to our panelists. Julian is one of Uganda's top female entrepreneurs, ranked as one of the top 100 lionesses of Africa and voted as the Woman Commonwealth Entrepreneur of the Year 2014 by Women's Chamber of Industry and Commerce. She is the founder and managing director of Delight Uganda Limited, producing the country's most popular fruit drink sold under the brand name Cheers. Julian's passion led her to set up a 1,700-acre piece of land where she has planted 1,000 acres of mangoes, 150 acres of citrus, 50 acres of guava, 500 acres of colono eucalyptus, an ethnobotany garden and with medicinal species, a nursery bed with a capacity of up to 2 million fruit and tree seedlings, and apiary unit with over 500 beehives. Julian also grows food crops on a sizable scale to guarantee food security. She has an outgrowers scheme of 20,176 mango farmers in Noya district under an umbrella body, Noya Fruit Growers Cooperative Society Limited, with Julian as its chairperson. Doctor, over to you. Dr. Julian, unfortunately, I just have a minute for you, or just a minute and a half.
Hello?
Yes, hello, we can hear you.
You have a minute for me?
A minute and a half to 2 minutes. Unfortunately, we're racing against time, sorry.
One thing I want to say is to thank the organizers of Castle Think Tank for organizing the webinar, and to thank all the presenters. I agree with you totally that whatever you have said is true, but I want to invite you to come at our Delight Farm Institute in Noya, and you see what we have managed to do and how we have managed to do it, and we work together to organize the remaining things. I will talk about the mango complete value chain as the chairperson of Noya Fruit Growers Cooperative Society. We need that dialogue between the government has to do their part, because for us as entrepreneurs, that is what we have managed to do. What we have managed to do is to work with Noya local government to establish the outgrower scheme with 5,000 outgrowers. And I have managed to set a model farm, which is there, and a center of excellence, Delight Farm Institute, to train on hands-on skilling. Why? The challenges we faced in establishing our model farm forced us to start a training institute. What we need in Uganda today is to learn on the farm how to do it and pick out our challenges and solve our challenges, and then have productive output. Like now, we have the mangoes. The mangoes are ready. We are hawking all our mangoes on the street. Every week we are having 2 trucks. We planted those mangoes with a view of making value addition. The factory has been delayed. Those are some of the challenges which have affected the youth not to join farming as a business. But if challenges, as the previous speakers have mentioned, can be addressed, I want to assure you, farming is the best business you can do in Uganda. And agree with me, our strength as a country is in agriculture. But there are few things which we need to address, the challenges. The first thing is the feeder roads, the infrastructure, and to address the complete value chain. All the stakeholders to come together as the entrepreneurs, as the development partners, as the government, and the professionals, if we can come together and handle sector by sector and set industries and have that complete value chain, I want to assure you it's possible and we can do it. What we have managed to do as Delight, we've not done it alone. We've been supported by private sector foundation under the recovery program of Northern Uganda. We have been supported by ABI Trust. They are the one who are paying our extension service when we are organizing the groups. We have 5,000 outgrowers organized into 25. Those are 200 groups. ABI Trust have done a lot to organize us, to help us, to support us in setting our nursery. UN Women, last year they supported 2,000 women, those who have planted, and private sector has continued giving us money through to organize hands-on skills for the people of the internships and those women who have never gone to school. So if we can join our hands together with government, development partners, and our professionals, especially those who have talked, if you can come to the farm and see what we have managed to do, and we put our hands together and we organize ourselves, I want to assure you we shall succeed. Our biggest challenge in the complete value chain, we have fruit flies. It should be looked at like locusts. Because when we handle our farm and we put the rowers and the beds, other farmers, smallholder farmers who cannot, the fruit flies spoils all their fruits. That's why it's only Delight Uganda, which has managed to put the mangoes at the table, at the road. Now we are marketing. Our mangoes are ready. Every week we have two lorries. We are making losses, post-harvesting challenges. The roads are not good. The money, there is no money in the economy, and the challenges of the middleman. When we take a lorry to Kafumbe Bukasa to save, we spend more, almost 50% of the money, we spend it on transport and in the marketing. But if the factory was there and the farmer is planting mangoes, knowing that I'm going to sell it at Delight, people would be encouraged, especially the youth. They would come and embrace us, our complete value chain, and they produce. But we have challenges we cannot handle as Delight. For example, we can't manage to pay our extension service to handle the 5,000 outgrowers. Those are 200 groups. It becomes a challenge. The infrastructure, the road from the farm, we have lost for 3 years. We cannot access the main road. And when you look at the diseases, we talked about pests. We have diseases which are so hard, like bacterial infection, anthracnose, powdered mildew. It needs the scientists to come and handle and do their part. For us entrepreneurs, do our part, government do their part, the development partners do their part, and then together we mentor our youth to come and embrace fruit farming as a business. The opportunities we have, the fruits are ready, and it is the only remedy for COVID-19 today. Everybody needs to eat a fruit to survive, to build the immune system. We also have honey, which also works together with the fruits to suppress the disease so that people can come out of sickness. And the long-term gain, when the fruits, when your fruits are ready, you can get, starting from 4.8 million per year from 1 acre. After 7 years, you get 8.8 million from 1 acre of fruits. I want to call upon the Minister of Agriculture. You come together and visit us and see what we have managed to do. Ours was to do a model farm to prove that it's possible. All the fruits can grow well in Uganda. And if our complete value chain is and the factory is on, I assure you today that the youth will embrace fruit farming. And
Doctor, I have to stop you there, unfortunately, because of time.
I mean, I just conclude that if our complete value chain is supported, our fruit value chain will support the middle status income, and millions of people will benefit out of it. I want to thank you so much for the trust you put in me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Julian. And please, participants, don't throw any fruits at me for stopping Doctor. You realize she had a lot to say. Now, the beauty of COVID is that we have learned that we actually can have a meeting with the Ministry of Agriculture, for example, without having to move over to the ministry, hire a hotel to have the meeting, or a platform like this enables us to come together. And I believe that the commissioner has taken note of this, but also as CASO, we're going to document all this, and we will share the document with the commissioner, with the minister as well. But Dr. Julian, I encourage you, please put your thoughts down, because it seems like there are quite a number. And I know that CASO can benefit from those thoughts. The Ministry of Agriculture can benefit from those thoughts. Now, the questions are really many, and I encourage you to keep asking, because that's what's going to make our discussion quite fruitful. I would like to go to Joshua. There are a number of questions that have come up after your presentation, and I will not do you justice if I put any particular one to you. So is there that one, two things that you absolutely have got to respond to from what you have heard so far?
Thank you very much, Gabriel. I have attempted to respond to some of the questions by two typed answers. I just hope that those will be read through. I'll continue to respond to count, but just maybe two or three, which I think I would respond to here is the question was raised regarding issues of poor quality or fake products coming into the market and being sourced by inadvertent farmers, being purchased by inadvertent farmers who apply it to either their animals or their crops and suffer as a result of it. And what can be done around this? There's also there's some questions that have been asked around the issue of the financing of agriculture. And then maybe just one thing on what Mrs. Dr. Julian has said. So I'll just answer those. With regard to the fake products, one of the reasons we started our recommendations on organizing the production side is that it helps you to address a lot of these issues. Once you have organized cooperatives or organized farmers groups, even the sourcing of inputs can be done in a coordinated manner. If you can do it that way, then you get good products, you get genuine products. For as long as farmers are going out individually and getting their own products from from wherever, whichever individual claims to be a dealer, you're always going to have fake products in the market. So you cannot look, and I think Dr. Patience said it very well when he stated that you cannot address particular problems in isolation. You've got to look at the whole value chain. The same for the case of these products. Then,
Joshua, could you just hold on to that before you go to the next point? Because I'd like Dr. Patience to respond to this. Dr. Patience, I know that there were initiatives. Yes, they were donor funded, but there were initiatives to deal with fake products on the market. One that comes to mind very quickly is the Kakasa of, verify that these seeds are genuine seeds from a genuine dealer. And those, what has happened to those initiatives? Because they seem to be working for the farmers.
Well, the ministry has come out very strongly on the issues of dealing with counterfeits and fake agricultural products and chemicals on the market. One is that we have actually created the whole department of inspection and certification services. So it is a fully-fledged department, and we have one of the main problems we were facing was even manpower, because you're supposed, even the ministry is supposed to inspect all these processes right from the time they are growing, they're preparing the seed, up to the time they are supplying it. But all these processes, so even this, it's supposed to have every seed company should have a resident inspector who is following up whatever they are doing. And even the export companies in all these park houses, you are supposed to have inspectors, but we didn't have that kind of manpower. So we have put in place now a fully-fledged department, and we are recruiting staff to ensure that they are able to do that technical work. Then the enforcement part of it, we have also we created the agricultural police to ensure that we are able once the inspectors find a fault, these people are immediately apprehended.
Okay.
So the processes now are in place, and even regarding even the animal agrochemicals, the chemicals for acaricides and veterinary drugs, they are managed by the National Drug Authority, which is in the Ministry of Health.
Okay.
So we have been working to see how do we harmonize this. So we are now working with the Ministry of Health to ensure that the veterinary section within the National Drug Authority is strengthened.
Okay.
And then coordinated well with the inspection services in the Ministry of Agriculture.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Joshua, back to you.
Thank you, Gabriel, and thank you, Dr. Patience.
I have another appointment.
Okay. You're not able to stay with us for the remaining 24 minutes because we're ending in 24 minutes. Your microphone is muted. Sorry, we didn't hear that.
I have an important appointment in Kampala at midday, and I'm in Entebbe.
Ah, okay. All right. All right. Doctor, thank you very much. And we appreciate that you are able to stand in for the minister. We will document the rest of the conversation and we will make it available to you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. I'll be happy if you can send in your input as quickly as possible.
Yes.
Then you would get sure that some of these issues are really captured in the paper because it's urgently needed.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Doctor. We will move quickly.
Thank you.
All right. Back to you, Mr. Ogwala.
Thank you, Gabriel. I was going to say that linked to the issue of having fake products is also the need to have appropriate products. As you know, there's been a lot in the media regarding the impact of some of the products that are used in Africa, the agricultural sector in Africa. Products like Roundup, which have a significant negative impact on the land and such other products. So it takes us back to also what we spoke about earlier on the need to have a close relationship between the farmer groups and cooperatives, working closely with those who are doing research, both private and public research, and which then informs the government initiatives. Dr. Julian has just mentioned, for instance, a problem that they're having with the fruit flies. Now, that's a serious problem. That's actually a problem in her subsector, given the impact that her cooperative is having on the fruit industry. So that's if we had both the NARO as a public research institute, as well as other private research institutes working with her and helping inform government policy, these are things that would then be addressed. So I mean, what she has raised does demonstrate the need for that link that we talked about. The other two things I'll talk about are on the financing. I applaud Josephine for the way she spoke very, very clearly and robustly on the need for financing and how it can be organized. Maybe what I'll just add is, and maybe to emphasize what she said, all of these financing mechanisms have to work together. So when we do talk about the prospect of having a specialized agricultural bank, it's not to have it work on its own, but rather to work through and with cooperatives, because you can never quite have one institution that will reach the farmer down there. You've got to reach the farmer through interventions that are closest to him. So you'd have the cooperatives as the interventions closest to him, or SACCOs, and I applaud Josephine for the work that they are doing to formalize and build up the governance structures of SACCOs, because that again brings the access close to the farmers. But all of these things should work together. And I'll just emphasize the need for that agro insurance, because what the agro insurance actually does, as I said, banks generally are wary of investing in agriculture because they don't quite understand the risk, and you can't blame them if no bank will invest in something whose risk they don't understand and can't manage. But agro insurance helps to actually de-risk or reduce the risk of the particular farmer. So if you can have, particularly through government policy, if you can have a push of massive subscription for this, then that in itself will open access for credit into agriculture from commercial banks. So that's I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Joshua. I am looking at the time we have left and the number of questions. Will not be able to actually ask those questions, but thank you all panelists for actually going to the Q&A and responding to those questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to each of the panelists and ask for your takeaways. And if there's something that needs following up, I will follow up with it. But let's start with you, Josephine.
Thank you, Gabriel. My main takeaway is from Dr. Naluyima to share. We need a cultural change in all of this. We're at the ages where we've listened to these things for so long, and maybe we may not act as fast. So the effort they are making at the school level, especially primary school level, informative years, is quite critical. And I think it was Dr. Patience who was showing a bit of impatience of so much talk, no action. Where are we going with this? So if we inculcate this right from primary, if we look at our education system and ensure that agriculture is a conversation, and indeed there is no, it will build the cultural change or transformation that we need as a country. And I would like to use the example of the 70s and that drinking of milk. That one was a given. In each school, you had to take that small pack of milk. So the difference, and it was happening in the region, in ESC, what happened is that Kenya maintained it, Uganda dropped it when the wars began, when the insurgency and the turmoil began. And Kenya by far has a very high consumption of milk than Uganda does have. So if we are to think of building on markets, if we are to think of boo-boo, there's a lot we need to do at the education front with our children. Thank you.
Yes, just before you go, how can the farmers make themselves attractive to the big financiers? Because, you did talk about the issues there. What can the farmers do so that they're attractive to those that are financing and can finance their kinds of projects?
Yes. Sometimes I wonder whether they can, depending on their size, whether they can be the drivers. Do they require some element of support? Just like extension is a given, right from my grandparents' time, extension was a given. So the same demonstrations, the same extension, the same training we take to the farmers is the same conversation we take to them to cooperate, to group up, to take up small phones and their apps. And this can happen. Aquarion is showing it in especially Eastern Uganda with coffee farmers, that they can actually register on USSD phones and be traced. So, but I think we need to work with them. Yes, they can, but we need to work alongside them, work with them through our partnerships, through our collaborations to see that they can become more unified to get the economies of scale in terms of access to markets, in terms of access to information, and access to inputs, as has been mentioned. Thank you, Gabriel.
Thank you. And for all the people that are asking whether the presentation will be made available, the presentation by Joshua, that presentation will be made available. So do not worry about that. Mr. Namanya, over to you.
Thank you, Joshua. My last take is that we have to have a mindset change. This country cannot thrive, cannot develop without agriculture. And if agriculture is to be our driver to industrial development, then the government must do all it takes to ensure that agriculture is really a priority and is seen to be so, especially in the budgetary terms. Two, we have to revive cooperatives. From the submissions of everybody, you have heard we are talking about financing, we are talking about issues of to do with the quality, issues to do with the inputs. All those things cannot be done in isolation without cooperatives. Cooperatives are very, very key in ensuring value chain, right from production to processing, transportation to marketing, name it. It is not possible for us to have a vibrant value chain sector without cooperatives. That's the bottom line. We can't.
Okay.
Then three, we must ensure that we invest heavily in ICT. As you have rightly said, we have been in this meeting. There is no cost that we have incurred. We are going to have transportation, to have feeding, to have accommodation, to have, but with ICT, and which is the way to go. We have to ensure we must ensure that we invest heavily in ICT, so that together, ICT enables us to move forward, to do marketing, to do research, to do everything that we need. We cannot escape it. Thank you so much.
Just before you go off, this is Gabriel. Just before you go off,
Gabriel, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. There's the issue of cooperatives, very important. Government went ahead and even put up got a minister for cooperatives. And the other things that you're talking about, government has made a pronouncement in relation to those things. How come we are not seeing the effect actually translate? What can be done to ensure, for example, that yes, now that we have a minister for cooperatives, we've had the president talk about cooperatives, the officials from the ministry are talking about cooperatives. How do we get these things on the ground so that we actually see results?
Thank you, Gabriel. Essentially, that's what we are talking about. Because it is not talk, the action. The ministry is there, it is true, but is it of any effect to the farmers? Have we seen it in practice? Because what is needed now is to actualize what is being written down on paper. And for this to happen, Parliament, for example, must be involved. It is a very key stakeholder. They must show us the direction, because we have voices, fine, but we are not the ultimate. So Parliament, civil society, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Trade and Industry, we must all work together to ensure that we actualize this. Otherwise, it will be on paper, and it won't help us.
Mr. Namanya, thank you. That has made me think that it's also important to share the paper that will come out of this discussion with the parliament, at least the Parliamentary Committee on Agriculture.
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Twine? Mr. Twine, can you hear me?
His mic is off.
Yes, I see his mic is off. I'm trying to... Okay, if Mr. Oh, yes, now he is ready. Mr. Twine, go right ahead. Excellent.
Okay, thank you, Gabriel. I hope this time the internet is fine. Thank you, all the panelists. Thank you, Joshua and Dan and Mrs. Josephine. My take on this is actually back to cooperative. We have to look at this, the agriculture, food security, food value chain, and everything as whether it is post-mortem or a cure. Now, the cure is, or the issue is, are we dealing with a problem or with the causes to the problem? If I've been engaged in the cooperatives, in the campaigns for the milk farm gate prices, what I really found out that it's in much of the time, it is not about government at Yambe. It is not about what government can actually do for us. It is about what can we do for ourselves as farmers first, so that government can actually plug in. The stakeholders like Josephine can also plug in. All they need is an organized group. All they need is to see a farmer or a group of farmers who are really organized, and they need just a little push. Now, we need to start looking at strengthening cooperatives. Cooperatives are not working because they within themselves have their own issues, more administrative, some are mindset issues, some are ego issues. We really need to change our mindset first. We need to start trading as companies, and we need to start to strengthen our cooperatives so that we can actually benefit from every other engagement. There's no way Abbey Trust or Abbey Development Finance would engage you, a cooperative, when you have no records, when you have no transparency, when you have no market. Been engaging with processors. The processors have issues or challenges with cooperatives because they are not consistent in their supplies. So they cannot even engage and have a contract, a supply contract. So those are issues that we really have to look at. The causes to the challenges and the problems that we have are mainly or largely mindset issues. Leave alone the policies, leave alone the research gaps, because there's a big distance between a researcher at Makerere and a farmer in Lyantonde, completely. I recently took some researchers down to Lyantonde, and farmers were really impressed, but they were asking one question: where have you been? And researchers, you can't blame them, because you need a lot of funds to do research. Government institutions, like Dr. Ramigisa said, are doing research that is based on the objectives of the funder, not to the local implement. So we need to, one, engage the farmer, strengthen the cooperative, change their mindset, then bringing the government to really to supply the input. But when you're ready, prepare the ground.
All right.
We need to embrace technology with the farmers, and we need complete government engagement with the local farmer, not to just farmers to think government at Uyambe and government to think farmers should organize themselves. There has to be a link, and then the rest can come in.
Government is putting money. Government is putting money into some research institutes, like NARO, for example. Is that the kind of research we are looking at in this case?
Yes and no. The research should be not thinking for the farmer, but thinking with the farmer. Most research done is actually you sit in the boardrooms, draft questionnaires, and send out questionnaires, or just get engaged with the questions and then compile reports. But you need to be practical enough. Get to the ground. Let's engage farmers. If it is goat farmers or crop farmers or dairy farmers, get to engage to know the exact challenges. For instance, why is it difficult that the cooperatives are not, the cooperative model is not really well working? There are so many embedded challenges on the ground and in these cooperatives that we found out that are all it takes is just to create some incentive to the cooperative, so that the cooperative member can actually stick there, have terms of references, have administrative rules and guidelines, have records, complete records, so that even the cooperative can borrow to a bank or from a bank. But
Okay.
the way they are now and operating, it may be difficult for, except for a few, for financial institutions to actually fund, and then the trickle down effect occurs.
All right. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Naloima. Please unmute your microphone.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for participating. My take home, there are two. One of them is to build on a comparative advantage of our different crops, like the tropical crops. And the best example is the Delight Company. Thank you to Gillian. The Delight Company did a very good job, went to Noya, and then did all that, the juice, the mangoes and the juice, and now they're selling. Irrespective of the low income they're having at the moment, but at least the value chain has been produced and they can export or even sell to us before even the export. So it's very good. Like we have to deal with like our tropical fruits are very nice, and you'd actually, because now we are looking at post-COVID, if we can all go, or not everyone, but if farmers can go out there and plant these rare crops like guavas, jackfruit, avocado. Now there's this avocado that has come on, and we have this comparative of that. Now these are things that other people out there, because of the nature of our climate, they are here to stay, and yet out there the tropics are not there, so we can send and actually export this food out without competing with anyone, because we have all these tropical fruits available. And then my other take home is the e-commerce. This is something we need to engage in as farmers, where first of all, it's like we earlier said, it helps farmers meet different buyers, and also you end up selling fresh commodities without having hassles or in terms of transportation and all that. So it's very good. It increases farmers markets, and then we meet different people, and then it actually also helps in making sure that the value chain is actually developed. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are out of time, and we need to be closing in a few minutes. I'd now like to take this opportunity to invite back somebody that we had from in the beginning, person who gave us the opening prayer, Mr. Mike Kwatampora. He is a farmer and he runs a farm in Mukono district. He's actually an information technologist by profession and a farmer by practice. He's also a member of the Uganda Internet Exchange Point. I'd like to invite him, one, to wrap up what we've just discussed, and to close with a word of prayer. Before he does that, I'd like to thank all participants and all our panelists for having this discussion. This discussion does not end when we say amen. The discussion actually continues. And like we said earlier on, many of these ideas we have spoken about before. The difference is going to be if we go ahead and implement, and each of us can implement at our level. Now invite with me Mr. Nkwatampora.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. I'd like to thank all the panelists and all the presentation. I have learned a lot despite the years of farming that I've been in, and I'm hoping to get in touch with some of you to see how we can implement some of the things that have been shared. That said, one of the areas that I see has been posted in the QA, and I believe was addressed as well by one of the panelists, is the issue of middlemen in the markets. I personally threw out vegetable farming and getting myself into Nakasero market or Nakawa market or Banda market because of the issue of middlemen and cartels in the marketplace. One of the hopes that I personally have as an outcome from this conversation, and when it finally gets into the parliamentary section and it's a public discussion, is how to deal with middlemen and cartels in the market space, because they utterly and completely frustrate us as farmers. I see one of the things in the Q&A says that they are needed, subject to debate if you've not experienced them. But I truly hope that this is one area that can be addressed. Again, thank you, panelists. Thank you, Gabriel, for such an incredible host. If permitted to, I'd like to close off with a word of prayer.
Please.
Let's pray. Father, I thank you for the time that you've given us together. Thank you for the wisdom that you've given us through your children, through your people. Thank you that we as a nation are putting to use, Almighty King, the gifts, the talents, the abilities that you've given us. The words that come to mind from the word of God is, if one person can put 1,000 to flight, two will put 10,000 to flight. And I believe that with all the minds that have come together in this, that we should be able to grow agriculture in this country to the benefit of our people and the nations around us. Father, we thank you for the wisdom that you've given us. We thank you for the insights that you've given us. We thank you for the understanding that you provided us with. And our prayer is that this shall be adopted, not just for this nation, but for the nations around us and world over, for the benefit of agriculturalists, farmers, and the whole world. In Jesus' name we do pray.
Amen. Before you log off, just give me a few seconds. Next week, we will be discussing the manufacturing sector. So if you are interested in manufacturing, or you know somebody that's interested in manufacturing, please ensure that they register for the webinar. During the week, we will be sending you information in relation to that particular webinar. So please get in touch with people who are interested in that sector. It's going to be a very good discussion. That is, the sector is manufacturing. So this conversation continues online, and please expect to receive a summary of the deliberations from today, but also you can request for the ones that we had previously. Our panelists, thank you very much, and everybody on this webinar, God bless you until the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gabriel.